All right, so today we are looking at fieldwork, and fieldwork is a required part of our AAS degree path in human services. You have several options on how you can complete this, and there's a certain sequence for completing your field work and a process for getting placed in those settings, and a lot of great opportunities. When I came on board at Forsyth Tech, that was one of my favorite parts of our program. I think it makes it really strengthens what you can get out of your degree in our human services paths. So I am going to turn over the controls to Ms. Mitchell, who is going to be taking us through and introducing you to those steps. So go for it, Lubaba.
All right, thank you, Betsy. All right, so some of you may or may not know me. I am Lubaba Mitchell. Some of you may have me in classes right now. I'm guessing since you're all in intro, you're just starting out. So you have me possibly in a class right now, or you may have me classes. But mainly what I do here at Forsyth is field work. I instruct some of the classes, but mainly what I'm here to do is field work. And as Betsy was saying, that in order for you to graduate with your AAS, you have to complete a field work requirement. You have to do an internship. There are a couple of well, I'm going to talk about. So let's get started. So there are two options for field work. There is something called clinicals, and then there's something called work-based learning. And we're going to first start off with doing a quick comparison of the two and which situations you would decide to do either or. And so to start off with, this is my contact information. Since this is being recorded, whenever you have access to this video, you'll have access to it. But another place you'll find my contact information is if you ever have received an email from me. It's in my signature at the bottom of the email. So as I said, all students who are graduating with an AAS have to do some field work. The two options are work-based learning and clinicals. Now, there is an exception as far as the options. You, as the student, have the choice. You can make the choice as to which of the two you want to do. There was a gerontology AAS degree, but that has phased out, and that's not really available anymore. But anyone who's still in the gerontology track of the AAS degree must choose work-based learning and substance abuse students, and we'll talk about why substance abuse students might want that. So again, gerontology because of the requirement for that type of degree, gerontology students have to do work-based learning, cannot do clinicals. If you are a student that is interested in substance abuse as your field, as where you want to work after you graduate, one of the things you'll ask yourself is whether or not you intend to get a CSAC certification, and now it's called something else. It changes every so often, but it was most recently CSAC, and it may still be for now. That's something you'll learn along the way. In any case, if you are looking for certification in substance abuse treatment, it may be more helpful for you to do work-based learning rather than clinicals, because one of the requirements for the certification is 300 hours of internship fieldwork, and that is something that is offered by work-based learning. And so while you are a student, you can get the 300 hours of internship that you would need that would qualify you for an internship level of certification. You would find that it's a little bit difficult to get those 300 hours otherwise. There are a number of reasons why it might be more difficult. Yes, why it might be a little bit more difficult for you to get those 300 hours if you are not a student. And that's something that you and I can talk about. You can also talk about it with Debbie Lattimore, who teaches many of the substance abuse courses. She's very knowledgeable about substance abuse issues right now. So I can have that conversation with you, or if Debbie Lattimore is your advisor, that's something that you, or if you have taken any of the substance abuse courses, that's a conversation that you can have with Debbie Lattimore as far as why it might be a little bit more difficult for you to get those 300 hours outside of being a student. So the comparison of the two is that work-based learning is a 2-semester field work. In the fall and the spring, it has to be done in that order. Very, very few exceptions, and it's kind of difficult to make happen in a different order. So fall and spring, and that's important because it means that you have to know that you want to do the 2-semester work-based learning much further in advance than if you were to choose clinicals, and we'll talk a little bit about that. In any case, work-based learning is 320 hours total. That's where that 300 hours would come in for the substance abuse certification. Each semester you would do 160 hours. It can be competitive. Your resume does get sent out in the same way as though you were applying for a job. The placement site has the option to turn you down for that placement, and with work-based learning, it can be a little bit sooner than your last semester, as opposed to the comparison we'll make with clinicals, which is to be done in your very last semester, absent 1 or 2 classes that you may have to still take. But it should be in your last semester. Work-based learning can be a little bit earlier than that. There are certain courses that are required in order for you to do work-based learning, but it doesn't have to be in your very, very last semester. Now, for clinicals is 1 semester of field work, and it can be in either the fall or the spring semester. The clinicals are a total of 144 hours over the course of that 1 semester. And the process is not competitive where your resume is shopped around. You are matched to a placement. Placement agencies tell me how many spaces they have available for students, and I give them the students that they are going to have. And then again, that has to be done in your final semester. One of the things you may ask yourself is, why would someone decide on work-based learning over clinicals? And again, that's a personal decision. But one of the reasons is to get 300 hours of internship time to apply towards the substance abuse certification. The other is that for students who are gerontology students, it only requires 1 semester of work-based learning. So even though they do not have a choice, they have to do work-based learning over clinicals, they only have to do 1 semester of work-based learning. But again, that degree itself is being slowly phased out, and it's not available to anyone newly entering the school. Other than that, many of the students select clinicals for their field work and go for the 1 semester. So part of your field work is going to include courses and coursework that you will take at the same time. For work-based learning, if you're going to do 2 semesters of work-based learning, it's going to be both of the semesters that you're in work-based learning. The courses have to be done at the same time as the work. There is a seminar class, and that's going to be somewhat like a typical class where you have journals and assignments. And then there is the work experience that is the field work itself that you're doing. You're registered for a course, but it never meets online or in a classroom. It really is just tracking your hours. So there are 2 courses, no matter which one you select, work-based learning or clinicals. For work-based learning, the seminar class that you will have that will have the journals and other assignments is going to be completely online. There is no classroom meeting for that seminar. If you are in work-based learning, the only time you would actually see me face-to-face as it relates to the work-based learning is when I do site visits, and even that, to an extent, depending on what happens, is going to be online. The seminar for clinicals is a hybrid course, and so it currently meets every other week. After this semester, starting in the spring, it will be meeting every week in class, but there is always going to be some face-to-face meeting of the clinical seminar, and there's a reason for that, and I may or may not have time to go into that, but it's mostly it's related to being able to have a peer discussion. Both of the seminars, whether it's work-based learning or clinicals, are going to include assignments in Blackboard, journals. The work-based learning seminar also has discussion boards, so it would be your responsibility once you are in field work to make sure that you are checking Blackboard for both of the courses to make sure that you are up to date with the assignments and the things that are going to be required in Blackboard. So your application process is going to be slightly different for the two different methods of field work. So for work learning, the application process is run by the work-based learning office. Let me take a minute to tell you that work-based learning is a department that handles programs throughout the school. So there are work-based learning experiences in various technical and clinical programs throughout Forsyth Tech. And so human services is just one of the programs that the work-based learning office handles. And each department is going to have a different experience, but the work it's centralized at the work-based learning on the main campus. In order to apply for work-based learning, you first have to start by attending an informational workshop with the work-based learning office. And then there's an application and a resume that you will upload into Blackboard. That kind of is that gets you started and gets your information to the work-based learning department. And they will take it from there. They will send out your resume to your placement agency or agencies. You have the option to select more than one agency to receive your resume as part of work-based learning. And they handle it from there, get you connected, they set up your interview and the other parts of the process until it gets to the point where you are accepted by an agency. And then at some point it transitions to me because I, as the Field Work Liaison, I will be monitoring your actual placement at your work-based learning agency. For clinicals, it's a little bit different. Now, one of the things that I neglected to mention about work-based learning, and it's going to be the same for field work, for clinicals, is that the application process starts very, very early. I'm going to go more into detail about why and how long it takes in another couple of screens, but you should know that you have to start your application process at least at the beginning of the semester before you're actually going to do field work. We'll talk more about that. So for clinicals, the process is a matching process. Rather than an employer having the ability to say that they do or do not want to be at their agency for field work placement. For clinicals, they are given the students that they will have. You are matched when you apply for clinicals. You complete an application and determine which populations and which services you want to be doing your field work, what area you want to do your field work. And then you're also going to tell me what your schedule availability is, because both of those are going to be a factor in what agencies that you get placed. One thing to know is that there are different categories of agencies But we don't have access to every agency every semester. Some agencies can't take students in a given semester. It depends on their workload, how many other students they may have. Remember, we've got UNCG, Winston-Salem State, Salem College, A&T, all kind of in the same area, and all of those schools have students that have to do internships for various programs. And so there are some placements where you will find yourself working right alongside Bachelor of Social Work students from Winston-Salem State or from UNCG, because agencies take students from multiple schools. So having said that, that's why sometimes an agency might be available in a given semester, even though it might say it on the application. It might list homeless shelters, it might list working with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But when it comes down to actually matching you to the agency, we may not have placement in that particular agency or in that category of agencies. Every agency is going to have some sort of background screening. Some of them are very simple, some of them are much more intense, and it generally is going to relate to the risk level of the population that that agency serves. And so where an agency might provide services like homeless services, the risk level to the population is not as great as, say, if they were providing services to children. Children, elderly people, and intellectual and developmental disabilities are going to be three areas that are going to be very highly screened for a background check. And what that means is that someone who is a student that is applying for placement is going to have a difficult time being placed in any of those categories of agency if you have anything more than the most minor of misdemeanors. The reason is that those are very high-risk populations that the agencies have to keep safe. Children, people who are elderly, and people who have intellectual and developmental delays are going to need the most protection from any harm. So if you have a very, very, very light misdemeanor, then you might be able to actually be placed at an agency like that. But anything more than that, particularly things like assaults and anything that might be considered a sexual offense, those are going to be extremely difficult to be placed in those populations. And frankly, those two categories are going to be the most difficult to place at all, because those are the riskiest types of criminal history when it comes to an employer or your fieldwork agency, when it comes to risk to their populations. The category that's going to be probably the most lenient, or generally in that area of most lenient when it comes to background, is going to be substance use. And that is partly because people who are in the substance abuse field in terms of treatment tend to frequently have a background of their own in substance use, and they are in recovery, and they are coming back to provide services and give back to that community. So there is the understanding that if you are someone that had that in recovery for substance use, then there's a good possibility that you have some things on your record related to having used substances. And so that tends to be a more forgiving area. So what you need to know about that is that when it comes to your background check and your application, there is no place on your Forsyth Tech application that asks you your criminal record. Forsyth Tech is not going to collect information on your background or your criminal record. You have to know what is in your own criminal record. You should know what is in your own criminal record and know which categories of placement agencies you are probably not going to be accepted into. If you have anything more than a very, very minor misdemeanor, You're probably not going to get accepted at an agency that works with children, that works with elderly people, or works with people with intellectual or developmental delays. That's something to know. There is some information on the application that kind of categorizes, but it's vague, it's general, it's kind of iffy. If you have some criminal history, it doesn't say that you can't get placed. It just means that you have to select the category of agency that's going to be able to accept you. And sometimes you might be taking a chance, and all we can do is try. You do need to know, though, that if you have high levels of maybe an assault history or felonies, that it may come down to you finding an agency yourself. If I'm trying multiple agencies and you are not able to get placed at any of them, it may come down to you finding an agency that will work with you as the last step of what we're going to do. So, excuse me. So each agency is going to have their own process. As I said, some of them are going to be fairly simple. For some agencies, it's as simple as going to the courthouse and getting your criminal history from the clerk. Forsyth clerk, that's it. Hand it over to the agency. That's all. You're done. That's the entire background check. Some of them have much more intensive processes where you may have to get fingerprinted. You have to complete a form on the computer, give them your addresses for the last 10 years, something along those lines. Those are a lot more intensive. And again, those are going to be the higher risk relations that tend to have that intense background check. There is another agency, Novant is an agency that we work with for placement, and they tend to have an intense application process and background check. So it's something that we can discuss at the time of your application, but just be prepared and know that it could be as simple as a few minutes to go and get this criminal history, or it could be something that's going to take days or weeks. And some of them you have to pay for. Some of them, if you go to the clerk, I think it's something in the area of $26. If you go to the clerk to get your criminal history, some of them have different fees. Some of them have no fee at all, and it's just rolled right into part of their field work and their employment process. Some agencies have a high volume of employees or hirees, and some and also of interns, and so they have this process just part of their application process, and there is no fee to you. It just really depends on which agency and which category of population that you'll be working with. One of the requirements for all students completing fieldwork is malpractice insurance. That goes for work-based learning and clinicals. And it's fairly simple to get. You can either call the Forsyth Tech cashier, or you can go into one of the campus locations and pay $18, and you will have malpractice insurance. That you have to know what's going to be accepted at which locations. Not all of them take cash, and I think all of them take cards at this point, but not all of them take cash. And again, as I said, you can do it over the phone, and they will email you the receipt. One of the things to be aware of is that you have to know which semester you're buying insurance for. That's something that I have encountered these last couple of semesters, where a student will purchase insurance in the semester that we're in right now. So say right now for the fall semester, or they're purchasing it in the fall semester and need it for the spring, and it doesn't always say the correct semester on the receipt. So that's something that we'd have to talk about as we get closer to the application and actually putting in the application. It's something that you're probably not going to remember. I'll have to remind you of, because I won't even remember it tomorrow, so don't worry about it. In any case, it is a requirement before you can even begin your field work. So once you have started your process, you will be told when is when the time is for you to purchase your insurance. And one of the things that you should keep in mind is that all of these processes, or rather both of these processes, have steps, whether it's work-based learning or clinicals. It's step by step. You can't do everything at once because there are certain things you have to wait for the last step to be finished before you can move on to the next one. But you need to make sure that you're keeping in touch with me. And if you're going through the work-based learning process, the work-based learning office, so that you can be sure that you're following the steps completely and in the right order, and that someone hasn't been trying to reach out to you, because sometimes that happens. You will not have noticed that someone's been trying to call you or email you. So you need to make sure that you are keeping in touch with me and or the work-based learning office if you're doing work-based learning, just to make sure that your process is moving along in the way that you think it should be. That's an important piece, because you can't just submit your application and say, okay, I'm done. You have to wait for instructions or know the instructions to get to the next step of the process. That's something that is a continuous struggle every semester. Let's move on. Okay, so let's talk about the timeline. I mentioned that your process, your application process, should begin very early in the semester before you even start fieldwork. And this is going to give you an idea as to why. So before the semester even starts, before classes even start, I will already be accepting applications for fieldwork. Most students don't really get started until classes start because they're not on campus or paying attention to Blackboard or emails. But if you know that you are going to be starting your application for fieldwork, you should pay attention to your emails, pay attention to information floating around the campuses, signs that are up, just so that you can know if there's anything that pertains to fieldwork that you need to be aware of. So for the fall, that should say fall 2021, that should not fall 2020. For fall 2021, the application deadline is January 31st of 2021. For this current semester, I'm doing applications right now for students who are going to be starting fieldwork in the spring semester. Their application was due the end of August. So that gives you a sense of how far in advance the application has to be in order for us to start this process. Right after your application is submitted and I have a chance to go through all of the applications, then there is a process called matching. The reason that it takes I have to have all of the applications in is because I have to go through all of the applications and start sorting students according to your categories of interest, which population that you want to work with, and then also schedule. And I have to put all of that information together to begin matching students to their agencies. And I'm going to tell you why your schedule is important. There are some agencies that can only take students on, say, Tuesday and Thursday, and it can only be between, say, 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. on Tuesday and Thursday. If you are a person that works from 9 to 1, Monday through Friday, that's not going to be the spot for you. If you are a person that has classes on Mondays and Wednesdays, but you are free on Tuesdays and Thursdays, well, then you might be able to go into that list. So that's, it's kind of a jigsaw puzzle that has to be put together, and it takes me a few days to make that happen. I meet with your instructor, Betsy Zook, and we discuss the students that are applying and also the agencies and what's going to be a best fit. Because you may or may not know, but your instructor has a lot of great information. She knows many of you as students from having had you as in class, and also being the program director, program coordinator. And so she knows a lot about students but she also knows a lot about the agencies and what things are going to work better with her. So she and I consult and we start putting this together, and we decide which students are going to go into which agencies. And then from there, you will get your first information. You'll get an email from me telling you which agency and who to contact and their contact information. Now, this is important because you are making the first contact. The agency is getting your information. They're going to get, and I'll go into that on the next screen, but you are the one that's reaching out to the agency. The agency's not called you to schedule the interview. You are going to call them. Sometimes call and sometimes email. Some agency contacts are easy to reach by phone. Some are easy to reach by email. Your email that you get from me should tell you what's the best way to contact that person at the agency. But you shouldn't wait. You need to be keeping an eye on your email, and you should not wait to reach to that person because the agency contacts tend to be very busy, and they sometimes will not get back to you the same day or even the next day or two. It may take them a few days, and in some instances, it may take a week before that agency contact has a chance to reach back out to you to get that interview scheduled. You also, though, do not need to sit on your hands and just wait for them to get back to you. You need to get back in touch with them and follow up if you haven't heard from them, because sometimes they will have just forgotten. They'll have seen your email or your call, and they may have just forgotten, and you need to get back in touch and try to reach them. Otherwise, you'll just be sitting there waiting for a week or two, waiting for them to call you back, and then next thing you know, we'll be mid-semester, and you haven't scheduled your interview yet. So in any case, the email will have the information that you need for how to reach the contact person at the agency. The agency will get your resume and let them know who is coming to them so that they'll be expecting you to call or email them. I have had agency contacts tell me, this person that you sent me the information on, they never did get in touch with me. So it's not as though you're the only one with the information and you are expected to just reach out and the agency is going to be taken by surprise. They know and they're waiting. So if you don't give them a call within the first day or two, then that's not a good look for you. So just be mindful of that. The background process is something that should be done at the interview. So once you go in, you've scheduled your interview, go in for the interview. Any of the paperwork or the computer process that needs to be done to do your background check should be done at the interview. Right now, a lot of interviews are being done by Zoom, and so there may be a different process. It may be that they email you the paperwork, or that there's an online portal that you go through to do the paperwork. Just be aware that there is something that you will have to do in order to do a background check. And if it's not mentioned, then you should ask that question. You should find out, because sometimes the agency puts things off until later, and you will find yourself getting to middle of the semester or close to the end of the semester, and you haven't done your background check yet because the agency didn't always think that it was something that needed to be done right away. I try to let them know that we need for it to be done as soon as possible, but agencies, as I said, have different students from different schools, and they can't keep track necessarily of what Forsyth Tech process is. If they don't mention it, or if you don't actually complete paperwork at the interview, then you should at least leave with an idea of when you will do the background check and any training or anything else that may need to be done for that particular agency for their process. Again, each agency is going to have a different process. So they are going to be the ones who can best tell you what their process is. I do not have all of the details of every agency's process not readily at hand. The agency themselves are going to be the best ones to be able to tell you what the steps are to their process. If you ever have any questions, you can certainly ask me. But as finding out the process itself is best done at the agency. So after you've gotten your email telling you what agency and you've scheduled your interview and hopefully started your background check, well, the semester is still moving along. And registration starts in March for the spring semester. I'm sorry, in March for the fall semester. One thing to know is, remember those courses that I mentioned? One is a seminar, one is field work. The courses, you cannot register into those courses until you have completed your process. And that includes purchasing your malpractice insurance. The reason for this is because you know what it's like to register yourself in courses, or, well, if this is your first semester, you will find out. And it can sometimes be a little complex to get yourself into a course or get yourself into another course, drop and add, get into a course later than what you would have registered. The whole registration process can be a little bit complex. And so you are not ready to get registered for the courses until you're sure you've been accepted into field, just in case there's a hitch in the application process for field work, just in case you change your mind and decide this is not the semester for you to do field work, just in case your courses change and you either withdraw from a course or you change the way you're going to take courses and you're not ready to complete field work in the semester that you thought. Any of those things could happen before the time that you purchase your malpractice insurance. And in order to prevent you being registered into a course and possibly having to pay for a course that you then have to drop out of, the last step before you can get registered into these courses is to purchase your own malpractice, and that kind of seals the deal. One of the reasons that seals the deal is because malpractice is not refundable. We'll talk about that when we get to the malpractice screen. But it kind of lets us know you've gone through every stage of the process. You've submitted your application. You've been matched to an agency. You reached out to the agency, scheduled your interview, had your interview, done your background check. The background check should be the very last step that the agency needs in order to confirm or not confirm you for placement, because that just basically says that they already should have the idea that you are going to be placed there. It's just a matter of whether or not there is anything on your background check that will bar you from being placed at that agency. So the interview sometimes can be a formality. It's not a reason for you to treat it as though, it's just something for you to kind of breeze through, but something of a formality, and it's the background check that really determines whether or not you'll be placed at any particular agency. I have said all this to say you will be registered into 2 courses. You cannot register yourself. That is large and bold, but I promise you, somebody's going to forget. You cannot register yourself. Every semester, I get an email saying, I tried to register myself into the class, but something happened. If you can, just remember that part right there. You cannot register yourself. So this is the field work itself. Now, for work-based learning, when you start the actual hours, meaning you start at the agency, the first day, first of all, for work-based learning, field work starts same day classes start. So as soon as classes start, you can start your hours at your field work agency. There's an online orientation that you have to do that also counts as your course entry assignment, and you have to make sure that you do that right away. Don't delay the online orientation. You will submit your timesheets in Blackboard. You'll have them signed, and then you'll upload them into Blackboard. And then there are 2 site visits that I will conduct throughout the semester. If you do 2 semester work-based learning, then there are two site visits both semesters. The second site visit is optional. I tend to try to make sure I get that second site visit in because, again, since you are in the online seminar class and will never actually see me face-to-face if you're in work-based learning, that's the only opportunity that you actually have to meet with me as your field work faculty liaison. So I try to make sure I get that second visit in also. Measurable learning objectives are what basically set you up for the semester, what things you'll be working on in work-based learning. This is what they look like. Don't worry about it. Don't try to read it. It's just so that you'll have a sense of what the form looks like. Your site supervisor at work-based learning will determine which of these are 3 things that you'll be working on for the semester. We'll do it in consultation. We'll be meeting at the first site visit. Work-based learning used to do it before you were even placed at the agency, but now it's transitioned to something that I do at the first site visit. And so these 3 of these will be selected by your site supervisor. And that's the entirety of your work-based learning, and except for that, you just have to complete your hours at work-based learning and reach those measurable learning objectives. Now, field work is a little bit different. Before you start, you will set up your schedule with your site supervisor. You should know that clinicals is 12 hours over approximately 13 weeks. The semesters have been changing a little bit. We will have to see what it looks like for spring because of COVID-19 and a lot of the restrictions that have been put into place. I didn't mention that for work-based learning, it's about the same number of hours. It's a little bit less, but it's about the same number, 10 to 12 hours throughout this semester. One thing to know about clinicals is that you cannot end your clinicals early. You cannot bank a bunch of hours and be finished with your clinicals by the 8th week of the semester. You have to do the field work all throughout the semester to go alongside with courses, because the experiences are what you're going to be talking about in the seminar class, and you still need to be having your fieldwork experience while you're doing the seminar class. There is an orientation during the very first clinical supervision class, which is the seminar class. That's the one that's going to meet every other week, or starting this next semester and possibly beyond, every week in class. That's clinical supervision. Your timesheets will be submitted in class. You will hand them in to me, and at that orientation, we'll go over what your timesheets need to look like. What are the things that you can expect from field work? What's going to be expected of you? There are going to be 3 site visits in the semester for clinicals. That's going to be the first site visit, setting up your learning agreement, and the second site visit will be your midterm evaluation, and then a capstone demonstration. Your learning agreement and what you're going to be working on in clinicals throughout the semester is going to be based on your clinical skills and your professional skills. So all these semesters you've been learning about clinical skills, or you will have been up to that point, learning about different clinical skills and interviewing techniques and case management and group process. And this is your opportunity to actually come into practice. Your professional skills you should have been working on throughout these semesters also, certainly in orientation lab, and you will get the opportunity to practice those also. Really quickly, we're going to talk about the first site visit. So this is the learning agreement, the very first page. It talks about what your responsibilities are. This is the bottom of that same first page, and it still talks about you and your professional responsibilities, your professional behavior at field work. Now, these are not things that we're going to be selecting for you to be practicing, because you should have a certain degree of practice with these skills, or be prepared with these skills as you start clinicals. So you're not gonna just be practicing how to have a professional appearance. You should have that down pat for the most part once you get into clinicals. Things like a positive attitude, being punctual, and having good attendance at your site. Now, these are the things that we are going to be looking at for your learning agreement. These are the clinical skills. Your site supervisor will select 3 to 5 of these. Some of these are fairly universal. Things like reflective listening and establishing a rapport are things that you're going to be practicing at almost any site you go to. Those are the kind of key skills of being in human services. You have to be able to establish a rapport. You have to be able to listen reflectively. Some of these others are things that are iffy. Not every job site or every placement site is going to do intake interviewing. Not every placement site has groups that will be facilitated. So your site supervisor knows which ones of these are applicable. So 3 to 5, and that's what's going to set you up for the semester. Those 3 to 5 that your site supervisor checks off are the things you're going to work on. The rest of the learning agreement talks about what your site supervisor is going to do, their responsibilities, and then mine as your instructor here at Forsyth Tech. And that's it. That's the entirety of the first site visit and the learning agreement. We talk in an office, we meet, and then we set that up. That happens in the first week, maybe second week if we're running behind. Field work. One of the things that I didn't also mention is that clinical field work starts the second week of the semester, not immediately when classes start. There's a 1-week delay, and that allows us to have that clinical supervision class to get you started and know what you need to do, and also what you can expect from your agency and your site supervisor. About the middle of the semester, we'll have a midterm evaluation. Now, the midterm evaluation is going to be looking at those clinical skills that were selected, but also your professionalism, and kind of gauge how proficient you are behaving professionally at your placement agency. Everything is still going to be coming from the learning agreement, the ones that were checked off as far as clinical skills, but also all of the professional skills that were listed. This is basically what the midterm evaluation looks like. I've made a couple of edits to make some of these things more clear, because there's a lot of columns here, but this is essentially what it looks like. And so your site supervisor will let me know through this form whether you have practiced establishing rapport, reflective listening, interviewing, any of these clinical skills, or whether you really only had the chance to observe them. Now, the ones that your site supervisor checks off should be what we selected for your learning agreement, but they might decide that there are some other things that you've practiced that weren't on the initial learning agreement, things like case documentation. They hadn't planned for you to do case documentation, but you've been doing some. So they're going to check off that area, but then they're also going to tell me whether that's something that you're performing well, or you might need some additional practice or be proficient at. And I tell my students all the time, every opportunity that I get, that needing additional practice does not mean you have failed at that skill. It does not even mean that you are doing poorly. It just means you're still learning it. Remember, at this point, we're only at the middle of the semester. You are still working on how to do intake interviewing. You are still working on how to do facilitation. Or the other thing that needing additional practice might mean is that you just have not had the chance to do it yet. You may have been only observing group facilitation up to that point, and you still need additional practice to be able to actually say that you have practiced that. So that's something that always you should be aware of. I will let you know even more of, I'll let you know before we get to that point and when we're at that point. Needing additional practice does not mean you have failed or you are performing so horribly at that skill that you just need to be driven out from that agency. Here go the professional skills. Again, have you practiced professional skills? I think I took out this observed column because I didn't see that it made sense, but I think it's just, have you practiced each of these professional skills? Are you performing well? Needing additional practice? Are you satisfied? But just basically, how are you doing with this professional skill? And some of these you may also need additional practice. Hopefully, not too much, because these are things that you should be at a certain level when you get to placement. But some of these are going to be NA because you may not have an opportunity to, there's one of these that relates to the phone. You may not use the phone at your placement. And so anything like that will be NA. That is your midterm evaluation. That's the entirety of it. Once again, your site supervisor and I will be meeting in an office with you and we'll discuss it. Both of these visits, I have only had a chance to meet with you and your site supervisor in an office. At the end, at the end of the semester, within the last week of your field work, it might be 2 weeks before your field work ends, but somewhere around that time, we will have what's called a capstone demonstration. And there is no real check boxes. This is the form for the capstone demonstration. The capstone demonstration is my very first opportunity to actually see you doing the things that you've been doing at your site for the whole semester. Not some grand final project. It's me, the first time I get to see you in action. And I observe and I write my comments. Your site supervisor signs, I sign, you sign, that's it. That's the whole capstone demonstration. There are no evaluation check boxes or anything like that. It's just my notes on observing you running a group or doing an intake or something along those lines, even presenting to the faculty, or I'm sorry, the staff at the agency. So that is pretty much it. The important things for you to remember as it pertains to field work and your application process. Let's see. So remember, your application is going to start at least a semester in advance. So if you were applying for fall 2021, you would need to come and see me in January. You would need to be looking for an application in January or looking to submit an application in January. If you wanted to do 2 semesters in substance abuse in the fall and the spring, you need to see me in January. Now, what that means is that's 3 full semesters before you do. So you need to think about whether or not that's something that you are considering for yourself, because you need to get started with that very early. Spring graduation, there's an August application. December graduation, a January application. Again, it can be different if it's 2 semesters. You have to start an extra semester in advance if you're going to do 2 semesters of work-based learning. Application process can take a lot longer than you think, between trying to reach the site supervisor and getting all that back and forth information and doing your background check and all that. These days that these things can take add up, and it goes by very quickly. Please, 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 once you have started putting out interest for the fieldwork process, pay attention to any emails that you will get from me, Lubaba Mitchell, because generally, if I am sending an email, it's either to give you very important information that you need to know or request information from you that I need to know in order for your process to move smoothly. So those are the very important highlights, things that I hope that you will remember when the time comes for you to start your field work application. This, again, is my contact information. And again, if you ever get an email from me, it'll be on the bottom of any email, and it also will include my office hours so that you'll know when I'm in the best time to call me. Right now, email is the best way to reach out to me because I'm generally in the office during my office hours, and the office phone that they have newly installed are very interesting, and I don't think anybody knows how to work them. And so I can't even get my voice in it. So email is going to be the best and fastest way to get to me. Office hours, I tend to be right in my office at Maisie Woodruff 230F during my student office hours. So if you ever happen to be in the building, you can drop on by during those hours. That's about it. Any questions? Can I take any questions from anyone? I know your class is probably ending fairly soon. How much time I have?
Sure, we have plenty of time left, so let's open it up for questions. And you can go ahead and turn on your mic or go ahead and type those into the chat box.
And I know that this is a lot of information. You all, when you're first walking into one of you, you have something. It's a lot of information. you're probably in your first, second semester, so it won't really be relevant for maybe another semester or two. But don't worry about it. You'll be quite a bit. And if you ever take a class with me, definitely spiel. I'll be telling everybody.
So while we're waiting for some questions to come in, are there any highlights about things that are happening this semester with any of the agencies that would be great to share, Lubaba, or any of the things we see as trends or what we hope to be doing with agency?
What has happened is that, of course, there's a lot of differences between this time last year and what the agencies are doing now. There are some agencies that have had to move their services online, and they're not able to meet face to face with clients in the same way that they were before. Some of the groups that were being provided by, say, the parenting groups. And what's interesting is that our field is one that we never stop. So there are some things that have had to just keep going, very much, of course, with the safety guidelines in place in terms of mask wearing, hand washing, and that sort of thing, but have really had to keep doing just what they've been doing. The drug treatment programs are functioning very much in the same way that they were before, because that's not something that you can just kind of put on pause or not offer or do remotely. The homeless shelters are having to provide services very similarly in the way that they were before. But again, some of them are doing remote stuff. One of the parenting agency is doing a lot of their groups remotely. Other things like the food pantry, they can't do stuff remotely. So it just kind of, it's interesting to see which agencies are still able to function and still having to function in person, and which ones are having to move stuff online as a way of providing services. So that, and of course, with things changing every week, depending on what our governor says and what stage or phase we're in, agencies are not always sure about what they're going to be doing from one month to the next, and how they're going to be providing services. So that gets it gets a little weird when it comes to the application. People can describe what any given agency is doing.
So I love it from our students' perspective. It's certainly all of the things being in constant change mode and that we're adjusting as services are being provided. It certainly makes Lubaba's job more challenging to stay current and to be putting together for placements. From students, your perspective of being able to do field work, you're going to immediately be able to get up to speed on how services and how our profession is needing to be responsive and being responsive in a manner that, we can't keep up with in the textbooks and even our course designs. So I think it's a great piece to have as part of your program, and we specifically like to have you do it at your last semester so that it gives you opportunity if you wish to launch right from your fieldwork position into employment opportunities. With that, Lubaba, any good recent stories about our students being able to become employed based on what they learned or who they met through their field work?
Yeah, that's actually one of the best things about field work. A lot of the agency, well, I don't know if I can say a lot, but quite a few of the agencies are interested in hiring our students. We have some that reliably hire our students almost every semester. One of those is Bethesda. Um, Bethesda has taken on a number of our students after they finish field work there. Another is Parenting Path. They have offered at least a couple of our students jobs after doing their field work there. So some of the agencies are, are much smaller, much tighter, and don't have the ability to expand. Don't really have positions for our students to step into. One of the ones that we discussed early on was Sunnyside Ministry and how they work on a very, very much a volunteer basis. A lot of the people, their workforce is mostly volunteer, so they don't really have the ability to hire. But some of the other ones really have great positions that are open. I think Enrichment has hired one or two of our students.
Yeah, I was smiling here because when you jumped in, started naming agencies or places, I had several immediately come to my mind, and they were even different than the ones that come to your mind. So we have lots of those places, like the Enrichment Center was one that came to my mind, that there are a number of people on their staff that first got introduced there from our field work. Path of Hope being another one that has been very familiar with our students and likes to hire on our graduates from that experience. But we could keep that list going on. It's been a great bridge for many of our graduates. And then even those agencies that do not hire on, but do provide a very strong hands-on skills building experience, those students I know have been able to take their references or take what they learned and talk about it in their job interviews, and that being the score for them on being able to go from Sunnyside Ministry to possibly a position at Department of Social Services, or been able to take that as a springboard into their social work, continuing their education. So it's been a great benefit for many.
And sometimes we think about fieldwork as being something that we might want it to be, a somewhat easy task. But many of the agencies are very involved. The students are very involved in the activities and really busy and they get such great experiences there. They are involved in a lot of different things, and they can really, really speak to things like running a group or doing interviewing. They can speak to it from having done it almost since they got to the agency. Like some of these agencies are so busy that they put the students to work right away, and they get a great learning experience so that by the time they finish their field work, they really are proficient at that particular skill. And like you said, they can go to interviews and do those particular experiences and speak very knowledgeably about how to conduct an intake interview or how to run a group, or how to do some of the other the things that are listed.
Yeah, absolutely. So check in with anyone that is here with us live. If you are interested in continuing on from your AAS degree with us in human services to social work, I just kind of throw out a bridge with that. In a couple weeks, we're going to have Michael Thull, who's a professor of the social work program at UNC Greensboro, is going to come in and do a similar guest speaking with us in this class. Mike used to be in Ms. Mitchell's position, so he's very familiar with our program and our fieldwork program. And he's had now opportunity to teach both at our school and at a four-year university in the social work program. Mike will share with us in our meeting that he feels students who come out of our AAS program, and because of this experience in our classes and our field work, are able to be steps above where the students who are in their 4-year program who haven't had that same opportunity. So he says the pre-opportunity, or this first opportunity you have in our program, allows a bachelor's of social work student to be even stronger when they continue on and do more field work in those programs. So I just kind of wanted to give a heads up, a thumbs up to let you know that you're going to be able to use this not only for a bridge to employment, but a bridge to ongoing academic successes too. Let me pause with Lubaba and I talking here, and I want to hear from those of you that are here with us live. So let's throw out some questions or some key takeaways from this idea of looking ahead from your current semester to later semesters and doing field work. What things would be helpful for you to know? What excites you about that? What concerns do you have about that? And let's have a little bit of a conversation before we wrap up. So let's throw out some questions or concerns or just things that you found helpful from learning this information. So pick one of those and jump in with typing that in or opening up your mic. And maybe picking one of those that, whichever one's easier to kind of open us up with, something that was helpful from this conversation or something that raised a concern for you. Either one of those for getting us started.
While we're waiting for someone to comment, I've got a couple of students that I have in two of my classes here in your class, Betsy. I've got Vera, who's in a couple of my classes, and Cherie is in one of my classes also. If you want, you can type something into the chat if you have any questions. There is typing out a question while we're waiting for you. While I'm waiting to see the question, I just want to put that on mic because I realized in reviewing the recordings that doesn't pop up on screen in the same way that it does live. So it just, I'm reacting to the chat comments that have popped up. But in reviewing the recording, those probably won't be seen. Oh, Oh, that's a very good question. Vera's asking, if you work a job that is human service related, can you use those hours as a part of your, whether it be work-based learning or clinicals? And the answer that's going to depend. One of the requirements is that your work-based learning or clinicals hours has to be different tasks than what you would be doing for work. So let's say you work for senior services and you work for them in their lunch program, where we've had students in the gerontology program do their work-based learning with senior services in their lunch program. If what you are doing is something that is specific tasks related to your job and interacting with seniors and providing the services, what you do for the work-based learning would have to be an entirely different category of tasks. It can't be the same types of things. So you can't basically be getting paid and field work hours for the same things. It has to be separate enough so that you can kind of clearly see the difference between those two. But it is a possibility. You could do your field work at the site that you are employed. It gets a little tricky. It's easier to do that with work-based learning because of the way the agreements for work-based learning are worded. There's wording in there that makes it easier to actually be employed there. For clinicals, it is also possible. It's difficult. What we have experienced is having a student that is employed but stopped working during the time that they were doing the field work. And that gets a little tricky though, because what you have to think of is that your employer is your employer that you rely on to pay your bills, or well, for the most part, pay your bills. Your field work, while we want you to be professional as possible, it is a learning experience, and it is an area where there is the expectation that you are going to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. Sometimes the lines get blurred, and your impression as an employee at your job versus the impression that you may give as a student intern, it sometimes gets tricky. And then if you mess up as a student intern, we want your messing up to be a learning experience. But if you mess up, where you're working, it can possibly put your employment at risk, and that's something that you have to think about. That your employer may do you in a different way. Now, ideally, everyone's gonna go to their field work and they're gonna learn, and they're gonna put their best effort in, and they're gonna just do spectacularly. But things happen, and that's the ideal situation. That doesn't mean that that's necessarily what the end result is going to be. So you have to consider whether or not your employer, your relationship with your employer, is going to be the same at the end of your field work. So that's just something to think about. Kira, and I'm just saying, you were saying that you volunteer at the church, and you want to know whether or not that is a possibility. And it depends. It depends on whether or not, first of all, whether they would be willing to take you on as a student intern, because that brings its own responsibility for the agency itself. Partly, one of those is supervision. they have to be able to provide someone to offer consistent supervision and sign off on your timesheets and give you tasks and all of that. So that it's not just easy going for the agency. They have to put some work into having students also. Another thing that it's going to depend on is what exactly are you doing there? Are you serving at the soup kitchen? Are you sorting coats for the coat drive? Like, what exactly are the tasks there? Because just doing volunteer work doesn't kind of the criteria for human services. Remember that list of skills on the learning agreement. Some of those have to be ideally just while you're doing your field work. Are you working with people, interacting with people regularly? Are you running groups there possibly? Or do they do intake interviews where you might be able to participate in that? Do they do other things where you might be able to practice reflective listening, building rapport with is the population, the people that come in for services, are they the same? Is it only a few people? How many hours a week are there? Do they have, are they serving the public? There are a lot of things that would play into it. And then of course they have to be willing to sign the agreement from Forsyth Tech. The best thing to do is to get me a contact person from there that I could discuss what kinds of things they have available for a student intern to do and whether or not that might be a possibility. So that's the best thing I can tell you as far as specifics for that specific place. Welcome, Vera. Any other questions?
Anything more that we're working on? Lubaba, I think you tapped on it a little bit, but while you were answering some of the things with the last question, I wondered if you could just expand on the time for a student being in the field and how well that works if, say, they have other responsibilities. So how they're balancing and coordinating time with classes and family and other paying jobs.
Well, one of the things, the time, it could be answered in a few different ways, starting with the number of hours per week is 12. I mentioned that. But that doesn't mean any specific set of hours. That's your schedule for field work is going to be entirely to you and your site supervisor. If your site supervisor has time for you to work from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. and that's what fits into your schedule, that works fine. If your site supervisor has time for you to work from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. On Saturday mornings, then that's fine. If it's 6 to 10 p.m. on Sunday evenings, that's fine with me. Whatever works with your specific schedule and the services that the site provides. If you're only available from 3 to 6, 4 or 5 days a week, but your site is not open during those times, well, then that's not a match. That's not going to work. So it has to depend on your availability and the site's availability as to you guys fitting a schedule in that works. I will accommodate any schedule. I have done evening, I have done weekend site visits. I'm there when you're there, so that part doesn't matter to me at all. I'm not excited about having to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do a site visit, but it's what I got to do. But then there's also the amount of time that it takes out of your other responsibilities. Now, one of the reasons it is also designed to be part of your last semester is that you should not have that many classes to take during that semester. It's difficult to do a 12, 15 hour semester, rather 12, 15 credit semester, it's extremely difficult to do a 12 or 15 credit semester and add an additional 12 hours every week of field work. If you are someone who is employed part-time, full-time, then it gets even more difficult. So you have to take into consideration what hours you have if you are a parent or are caring for someone at home, whether it be a parent or another family member that you are the caretaker for. You have to think about how to fit these things into your schedule. It's not impossible because there are a number of Forsyth Tech students that are single or co-parent parents and are employed and maybe have one or two classes left to take and successfully complete their fieldwork. It is not impossible. You can do anything that you structure well enough, but it gets difficult. It's one thing to only be doing field work and the 12 hours of field work and the seminar course that goes along with it. It's a whole other thing to be doing field work and working and be a parent and possibly be taking other classes. So you have to really consider where that's going to fit in and make sure that you're making enough time for it. Because I am a person that is infamous for scheduling things back to back. And while that is the way my life works and things, I can, keep things going, it is not fun to be running from class to field work to home to parent to job or any combination of those, from work during the day, class in the evening, and field work on the other days, and then going home to parent. Or it gets hectic. And when you've got the stressors of it being your last semester and you're really focused on, okay, I definitely have to pass all of these classes with some good grades and complete my field work and do all of this so that I can graduate, it gets to be a lot. So you really want to plan your field work semester so that you may be taking maybe one additional course or two additional courses if you have to, and make sure you lean on your supports. We talk about your self-care and your personal supports. Well, some of you may not have taken orientation lab yet, but make sure you're leaning on, the supports that you have in your personal life to help you get through some of those things, whether that be helping you care for another family member or delegating some of the responsibilities. If you've got children, feel free to delegate those household chores. But yes, you got to plan it and structure it well to make sure you've got the time that you need to dedicate both to fieldwork hours and your study.
So just kind of the piggyback on what Lubaba was sharing there, I think it's valuable to think about field work and plan ahead for it. That's a lot of the reason we're wanting to start introducing this in your intro class, even if for some of you it may be several semesters out. And some of that planning ahead may be, like she was saying, will you opt for it being a full-time semester or a part-time semester when you do your field work? Field work is 4 credit hours. If you do it as clinicals, you can put all 4 of those in one semester, or if you're doing it as work-based learning, it'll be 2 credit hours. So if you're using financial aid and you need to have that minimum of 6 hours, or if you need to have it at the full-time level, you'll want to map out and plan that as part of the picture. We sometimes have students that will wait till their last semesters to do any of their classes that require a hybrid part or coming to campus. You may or may not want that to be part of your semester. If you only can fit in getting to your field placement, you may not also want to be coming to campus for multiple classes too. So things that you want to be considering or thinking ahead. We've had some students do some great individual problem solving, that they saved up some of their vacation time from their job so they could flex out a day a week from work, which allowed them from their other paying work, So that might be a case with you. Some of them have adjusted then of where their children may be so that they may have them ready for daycare or in the school year. We can certainly hope that we're going to have a shift happening sometime in our future from everyone being in remote learning in our K through 12 schools. So all things just to kind of keep in the forefront for yourself, and that you be the driver of planning this, and that this can be ongoing conversations then that you can have with myself, with Ms. Mitchell, with Ms. Lattimore, as we are your coaches and your advocates for, planning your completion of your degrees. So hopefully this has been a helpful session to introduce this topic. It is recorded. I will be posting it in the next couple of days in our class, and it may be one that you hang on to for looking at again in the future. So I'm going to wrap up here, and going to close the recording. I'll stick around if there's any more individual questions about this or our class. Otherwise, this will wrap it up for today's session.